Imagine standing at the edge of a glacier that moves 10 times faster than any other on Earth, then hours later walking into the crater of an active volcano rising from the ocean. Picture coral reefs so vast they're the only living thing visible from space, and deserts where massive monoliths hide most of their bulk underground like stone icebergs. This is Oceania, a realm where the impossible feels ordinary and every landscape defies what you thought you knew about our planet. Subscribe to join me as we explore these lands where nature rewrote all the rules. And wait until you see the island made entirely of sand that somehow holds over 100 freshwater lakes. Milford Sound receives 23 feet of rain per year, making it one of the wettest places on Earth. But all that water creates something magical. Waterfalls that appear and disappear with the weather, cascading down cliffs that vanish into mist. Speaking of dramatic landscapes, Mount Taranaki is so perfectly shaped that it doubled for Mount Fuji in the movie The Last Samurai. And then there's Lake Rotorua, which smells like rotten eggs because it sits on active geothermal vents releasing hydrogen sulfide. But it's not just New Zealand that defies expectations. Kangaroo Island has never been connected to mainland Australia. Its animals evolved in complete isolation for 10,000 years. The Daintree Rainforest is older than the Amazon and has been growing for 180 million years, making it a living museum of prehistoric plants. Moving into the Pacific, Bora Bora's famous lagoon was formed by a collapsed volcanic crater that's now completely submerged underwater. Even the cities have wild origins. Queenstown is built in the crater of an extinct volcano and was originally a gold rush town where fortunes were won and lost overnight. Now let's explore the most incredible places this remarkable region has to offer. Did you know that Milford Sound isn't actually a sound at all? It's a fjord, carved by ancient glaciers over 100,000 years ago. But the captain who named it didn't know the difference. Honest mistake. What he did know was that this place felt impossible. And standing here, you understand why. Mitra Peak juts nearly 1,700 meters straight out of emerald water, its reflection so perfect the sky feels doubled. That green, by the way, comes from glacial silt still suspended in depths exceeding 400 meters. But here's what makes Milford truly alive. When it rains, and it rains often, hundreds of temporary waterfalls erupt down those dark granite walls. The whole fjord transforms in minutes. You cruise 16 kilometers through mist and spray, fur seals lounging on rocks, dolphins cutting through glass-still water. Dawn is when the magic deepens. Low cloud threads between the peaks like breath. Here's the thing about Bora Bora. It's not actually an island. What you're looking at is the collapsed rim of a 7-million-year-old volcano, a caldera ringed by a barrier reef that creates one of the most surreal lagoons on Earth. And that lagoon, it shifts. Morning light turns it pale jade. By noon, electric turquoise. At sunset, liquid copper and pink. You step onto a dock, peer through the glass floor of your bungalow, and blacktip reef sharks glide beneath your feet like shadows. Mount Otamanu juts from the center, draped in jungle, its jagged peak wrapped in cloud even on the clearest days. During World War II, the Americans built a supply base here. Remnants of gun emplacements still dot the hillsides, slowly swallowed by green. But evenings own this place. The lagoon goes still, reflecting sky so perfectly you lose the horizon entirely. Did you know there's a glacier that moves up to 5 meters a day and ends just 19 kilometers from a temperate rainforest? Franz Josef Glacier defies everything you'd expect. 12 kilometers of ancient ice, roughly 15,000 years old, carving its way down through mountains draped in moss and fern. You stand at its face and the air shifts. Cold radiates off walls of turquoise so vivid they seem lit from within. Waterfalls thread off the glacier's edge, crashing into milky rivers below. Every visit here is genuinely different. The ice reshapes itself constantly, calving and compressing, opening new crevasses while sealing others shut. Named for an Austrian emperor in 1879, this place couldn't care less about titles. It moves on its own terms. Come early morning, when soft light catches those blue formations, and the whole valley glows like something not quite real. What you see rising from the red desert is only the tip. Uluru plunges nearly 4 kilometers beneath the surface, a colossal underground structure barely revealing itself to the sky. Think of it as an iceberg made of sandstone, 600 million years in the making. You stand at its base, and the scale overwhelms you. 348 meters tall, 9.5 kilometers around, the rock radiates warmth long after the sun dips below the horizon. For the Anau people, who have called this land home for tens of thousands of years, Uluru isn't geology. It's alive. Woven through with ancestral spirits and dreamtime stories that map the very meaning of existence. Arrive at sunset. Watch the surface shift from ochre to burnt orange to deep violet in minutes, shadows pooling in its ancient grooves. The desert falls silent. The rock glows. Did you know Captain Cook named these islands thinking he'd arrived on a Sunday? But he'd actually crossed the date line and was a full day off. That quirky mistake stuck, and now 74 islands carry the name Whitsundays across 1,500 square kilometers of the Coral Sea. Here's the thing, though. Only 8 of them are inhabited. The rest? Pure, untouched wilderness rising from water, so turquoise it looks digitally enhanced. You land on Whitehaven Beach and immediately understand the hype. The sand here is 98% pure silica. So fine it squeaks beneath your feet, so white it almost hurts your eyes against that impossible blue. Climb the lookout at Hill Inlet and watch the tides swirl sand and sea together like marbled paint, shifting patterns that never repeat. Below the surface, coral gardens pulse with species found nowhere else on Earth. The light fades golden. The water holds it. 180 million years old. Not the rocks beneath it, the forest itself. The Daintree was already ancient when dinosaurs roamed through it, and when they vanished, this place just kept growing. Plants that shared the earth with tyrannosaurs still rise from the forest floor. Cycads and ferns that have barely changed in over 100 million years. You step beneath the canopy, and the air thickens. Warm. Heavy with moisture, and the rich smell of damp soil and decay, the quiet machinery of life recycling itself endlessly. At Cape Tribulation, the rainforest does something almost absurd. It stretches right to the edge of the ocean, ancient green meeting tropical blue with no buffer between them. The Kuku-Yalanji people have called this place home for thousands of years, reading its rhythms in ways science is still catching up to. Morning mist clings to the treetops. Nothing here is in a hurry. You slip beneath the surface and the world goes quiet. Then color erupts. Electric purple, neon orange, coral formations sprawling in every direction like an underwater city. This is the Great Barrier Reef, and here's what gets me. It's the only living structure on Earth visible from space. Not a canyon. Not a mountain range. A living thing, stretching across 344,000 square kilometers of ocean. More than 1,500 species of fish weave through these waters alongside endangered dugongs and ancient green sea turtles. Indigenous Australians have known this reef for thousands of years, their stories and songlines mapping its rhythms long before satellites ever captured it from orbit. Arrive at dawn, when the water sits glass still and turquoise light filters down through the shallows. A clownfish darts into its anemone. The coral sways. Everything here pulses with a life that refuses to be ignored. Did you know this mountain is actually shrinking? Aoraki Mount Cook, New Zealand's highest peak at 3,724 meters, lost 10 meters of its summit in a single rock slide back in 1991. Its glaciers are retreating so fast that scientists use them as a living barometer for climate change. Yet standing at the base of the Hooker Valley, none of that fragility registers. The peak juts skyward like a blade, pale rock and blue ice stacked against a sky so clear it almost hurts. You breathe in and the air tastes different here, thin, glacial, sharp with cold. Maori legend says Aoraki was a chief turned to stone when his canoe capsized, and honestly, there is something deeply human about that silhouette. Catch it at sunrise, when gold light crawls down the ridgeline. The mountain glows. 2 million years of ice and fire, quietly on display. Did you know the Maori called this place Te Wai Wanaka, the water of the wild food? 2 million years ago, glaciers carved this basin into the earth, and what they left behind is 42 square kilometers of water, so turquoise it almost looks painted. That color? Glacial silt, still suspended from ice that finished its work millennia ago. You stand at the shoreline and there it is, a single willow tree growing straight out of the lake, branches reaching over the surface like something from a dream. Behind it, the southern Alps rise white against a sky that deepens to gold at sunset. The light catches the water, and every ripple carries color. This is New Zealand's fourth largest lake, the deepest in Otago, and somehow the quietest place you've ever heard. Did you know this park is named after a man who never actually set foot here? Abel Tasman spotted New Zealand's coast in 1642, but he sailed right past. 3 centuries later, his name graces one of the most intimate coastlines in Oceania. You arrive by water taxi, and the color hits you first. Turquoise so vivid it looks digitally enhanced, lapping against sand that glows almost gold. The coastal track winds through dense native forest, then spills onto beaches where fur seals lounge on sun-warmed granite. Keep your eyes on the water. Hector's dolphins, among the smallest on Earth. Surface in the marine reserve, their rounded fins unmistakable. At barely 23,000 hectares, the whole park feels personal, unhurried. As the tide pulls back at golden hour, every inlet turns to liquid copper. You're standing on a beach, salt air thick with coconut sunscreen and tropical fruit drifting from the markets behind you. And directly ahead, a residential tower climbs 322 meters into the sky. That's Q1, and it's taller than most skyscrapers in New York or Tokyo. Except nobody works here. People live here. The Gold Coast pulls off something almost absurd. A skyline that rivals a major metropolis rising directly behind one of Australia's best surf breaks. 60 years ago, this was farmland and timber country. Then the surfers arrived, and everything changed. At sunset, the whole contradiction catches fire. Orange light pours across the Pacific. Silhouettes of high-rises stretch long across the sand, and somewhere below, a kid in board shorts paddles out for one more wave. Did you know there's a place where people ski on an active volcano? Mount Ruapehu rises nearly 2,800 meters above New Zealand's North Island, the country's largest active volcano. And it last erupted in 1995, grounding flights and blanketing towns in ash. Yet every winter, thousands of skiers carve down its slopes like nothing happened. You climb toward the summit and the air shifts. That crisp alpine cold gives way to something sharper. Sulfur, drifting from fumaroles venting deep volcanic heat. Then you see it. A turquoise crater lake sitting right inside the cone, its color almost impossible, like someone spilled paint into the caldera. Sacred to the Maori, woven into their ancestral stories for centuries. The mountain breathes. You feel it. And somehow, that makes everything more alive. The rocks beneath your feet here are 2.5 billion years old. Not million, billion. These gorges existed before dinosaurs, before complex life, before almost everything you can imagine. Karijini National Park sprawls across 627,000 hectares of Western Australia's Pilbara region, and stepping into Hancock Gorge feels like descending into the planet's memory. Walls of rust red and deep ochre press close, layered like pages of Earth's oldest diary. Cool water pools in narrow slots where sunlight barely reaches. Ferns cling to ancient ledges. The Banijima, Karama, and Inawanga peoples have walked this country for thousands of years, their stories woven into every formation. Late afternoon light floods Wano Gorge, and the red walls glow like embers refusing to fade. Did you know one of New Zealand's most photographed beaches is also one of its deadliest? Piha Beach draws you in with sand so black it absorbs the light, stretching beneath volcanic cliffs that jut from the earth like broken teeth. The water glows turquoise against that dark shore, a contrast so stark it barely looks real. But those waves carry serious power. Rip currents here have claimed lives, and even experienced surfers treat this place with deep respect. Lion Rock rises from the sand like a sentinel, an ancient volcanic remnant the Maori have woven into centuries of legend. At sunset, golden light pours across the black shore, turning everything molten. You stand there, waves thundering, salt stinging your lips, and you feel it. This place is alive, indifferent, and completely unforgettable. The world's first commercial bungee jump launched from a bridge here in 1988. But here's what nobody tells you about Queenstown. The so-called adventure capital of the world also grows some of New Zealand's most celebrated wines. Pinot Noir vines climb the same hillsides where gold miners scrambled in the 1860s, their roots threading through that same ancient schist. You stand in a vineyard at harvest, breathing in earth and ripening fruit, and behind you the remarkables jut like broken teeth above Lake Wakatipu. That lake never sits still. It rises and falls 5 centimeters every few minutes, a pulse the Maori attributed to a sleeping giant's heartbeat. At golden hour, the mountains catch fire across the water. Adrenaline and tranquility, separated by a 15-minute drive. That's Queenstown's trick. Did you know Cairns nearly vanished from the map entirely? Founded in 1876 as a muddy port for gold miners chasing fortunes along the Hodgkinson River, this town was practically abandoned once the rush dried up. Now it's the closest city to the largest coral reef system on Earth. That transformation still blows my mind. You step off the plane and the tropical air wraps around you. Warm, heavy, sweet with frangipani. The Esplanade Lagoon glimmers turquoise against a backdrop of green mountains that tumble right down to the coast. Head offshore and the ocean shifts colors like a living painting. Deep sapphire giving way to electric aqua over sprawling coral gardens. At sunset, the whole waterfront turns golden, locals drifting past with nowhere particular to be. A gold rush ghost town turned tropical paradise. An hour north of Cairns, the road narrows through a canopy of palms and suddenly opens to something that stops you mid-sentence. Turquoise. Endless, ridiculous turquoise, pressed right up against rainforest, so green it looks painted. This is Port Douglas, and here's what gets me. This sleepy, palm-lined village where the biggest decision is lunch or snorkeling. It was a rough-and-tumble gold rush port back in 1877. Miners, merchants, and chaos. Now the only rush is getting to 4 Mile Beach before the light goes soft. You walk the Sunday markets barefoot, smell mangoes and grilled prawns, watch reef boats heading out at dawn. The Coral Sea stretches north toward the reef, flat and glittering. No one hurries here. No one remembers to. Did you know that entire rainforests can grow without a single grain of soil? On Fraser Island, or Kigari, as the Butchula people have called it for thousands of years, towering trees rise straight from sand dunes. That shouldn't be possible, and yet here it is. 123 kilometers of the world's largest sand island, shaped over 750,000 years into something that defies every rule of ecology. You walk barefoot across fine white sand so warm it almost pulses, then step into cool cathedral shade where ancient trees cling to dunes and drink from rain alone. Lake Mackenzie spreads before you like liquid glass, impossibly blue against the white silica shore. At sunset, the layered sands of the pinnacles glow rust and ochre. A whole world built on nothing but sand. Beneath a quiet lakeside town in New Zealand's deep south, thousands of living lights burn blue-green in the darkness. Te Anau sits at the edge of Fjordland, where the mountains plunge into water so still it mirrors entire ridgelines. But the real spectacle hides underground. A boat carries you into caves stretching over 250 meters, carved by swirling water over millennia. That's actually what the Maori name means, Cave of Swirling Water. Inside, your guide cuts the engine. Silence. Thousands of glowworms, each no bigger than a mosquito, casting a light so dense it rivals a night sky. The world's largest colony of them, pulsing softly in the dark. No photo does it justice. You just float there, staring up. What happens when you build a capital city on the wildest stretch of coastline in the southern hemisphere? You step off the street in Wellington and the wind nearly takes your jacket. This is officially the windiest city on Earth. Gusts funnel through the Cook Strait and slam into hillside neighborhoods with a force that bends trees sideways. Yet somehow, wedged between those wind-battered hills and a glittering harbor, an entire coffee culture thrives. You duck into a laneway cafe, espresso steam curling past your fingers, and through the window watch the red cable car climb toward the botanic garden above. At sunrise, golden light spills across the waterfront, turning the whole harbor molten. The Tararua Range rises sharp behind the city like a wall. Wind-scrubbed air. Perfect coffee. The world's southernmost capital earns every bit of its strange charm. A cathedral made of cardboard. 98 tubes of reinforced cardboard holding up a roof that shelters 700 people. That's Christchurch, a city that refused to simply rebuild after earthquakes leveled its heart in 2010 and 2011. Instead, it reimagined everything. You walk through the central city and the transformation hits you block by block. Massive street murals blaze across walls that once lay in rubble. Innovative structures rise where Victorian buildings once stood. But turn a corner into the Botanic Gardens and you're swallowed by green so deep it feels ancient. Flower beds erupting in color against the earthy tones of fresh concrete and timber. Named after an Oxford college, founded in 1850, yet nothing here feels stuck in the past. At golden hour, light pours through that cardboard cathedral, like something sacred born from wreckage. Did you know there's a city with more boats per capita than anywhere else on the planet? 135,000 boats for just over 1.5 million people. That's Auckland, a place where nearly 1 in 10 residents owns a vessel. They call it the City of Sails, and standing at the waterfront, you understand why. Masts crowd the marinas like forests of white birch, hulls knocking gently against docks while the Aoraki Gulf stretches out in impossible blue. This was once New Zealand's capital, founded in 1840, and the city still carries that confident energy. Sprawling across 53 volcanoes, its skyline punctured by the Sky Tower rising 328 meters above the harbor. At sunset, every sail on that water turns gold. Every single one. 2 out of every 3 kiwi fruit on Earth ship from one single port, right here in Tauranga. That makes this coastal city the undisputed kiwi fruit capital of the world, and New Zealand's fastest growing city to boot. But walk past the massive cranes and towering container stacks of that 1,000-hectare natural harbor, and something shifts. The salt air sweetens. Pohutukawa trees erupt in crimson blooms along the waterfront, their petals scattering across warm sand. You climb the slopes of Mount Maunganui as the afternoon light softens, and the entire harbor sprawls beneath you. Cargo ships gliding through channels carved by nature, not engineers. This was contested ground once. In 1864, Maori warriors held Gate Paw against overwhelming British forces in one of the New Zealand War's fiercest battles. Now, the only thing conquering you here is that golden hour glow bleeding across the Pacific. Did you know there's a volcano sitting 48 kilometers offshore here that could erupt while you're standing on it? White Island rises from the Pacific like a jagged fist of rock and steam, 150,000 years old and still furious. Boat tours once carried visitors right into its sulfurous craters, where the air burns your throat and the ground hisses beneath your feet. Yellow crystalline deposits cling to every surface and plumes of gas twist skyward against an impossibly blue sky. The Maori called these waters Te Moana Atoi, after the explorer Toi, who first found this coastline. Ashore, the bay softens dramatically. Emerald hills rolling down to white sand, orchards heavy with fruit. But your eyes keep drifting seaward, toward that restless column of steam on the horizon. From coral atolls to volcanic peaks, Oceania reminded us that paradise isn't just a place. It's a feeling of endless horizons and island time. Subscribe to keep island hopping with me. Which Oceanian gem calls to your wandering heart?